Lawyers of Reddit, what was your hold-it? Moment where you knew you would win?
My client was riding his motorcycle on a relatively calm street when this guy exited his garage without looking and run over him. In deposition, the guy brought a witness that was with him on the passenger seat. The whole time, the witness maintained that my client was driving too fast and that there was no time to brake the car. I asked him the same question a few times in different ways, making him tell the story again. In the fourth telling, he, already a bit frustrated, let it slip. Look, I've already told you. We were exiting the garage, and soon as I lifted up from getting my cell phone on the car's carpet. Wait, so you didn't even see the crash? There was no coming back from that.
At this moment he knew he fucked up.
My mum hit a guy on a bike with her car in a parking lot. She claimed he hit her. She also wanted to counter-sue the cyclist for scaring her. In her deposition, she started every sentence with, "When I hit him."
One of my friends got hit by a car when crossing the street in a crosswalk, on foot. This was back when we were in high school. The guy tried to sue him for the damages to his car. At one point, the lawyer called up my friend's mom and asked for the son's insurance information and pictures of the damage of her son's car. She explained that my friend was on foot and the lawyer just went silent for a bit. He said,
"Would have loved to hear that conversation he had with his client, Elle May."
Very abbreviated. I was prosecuting a convenience store owner for luring a young girl who regularly came into the store back to a part of the store to grope, fondle and kiss her. Child enticement. It was the only section of the store without surveillance camera coverage. They were in the back room for about 2 minutes and 17 seconds, per the timestamp on the videos. Of the many arguments the defence put on, one was there was no way there was enough time for anything to happen. In my rebuttal on closing, I asked the jury to imagine what could happen in the room in that amount of time, and I asked them to all close their eyes while I timed out 2 minutes and 17 seconds on my watch, in silence. After about 60 seconds, 2 of the jurors started crying. Knew it was going to be guilty right then.
I asked them to all close their eyes while I timed out 2 minutes and 17 seconds on my watch, in silence. Holy shit, that was a clever idea. Not only emphasized how long the time period was, but also let their imaginations run riot.
It's a classic argument lawyers make when they want people to imagine time. Judges hate it in a bench trial. They see it as a waste of time and assume they can time things as needed. But it's definitely helpful for jurors.
I trapped a defendant pretty badly one time. He testified in a depot he had a green arrow for his left turn, and that my client ran the red. Unfortunately for him, the additional turn lane arrow was installed 2 months after the wreck. Case settled for policy limits a week later.
I was reviewing the transcript of an interview with a child. The child made incriminating statements against my client. At one point when discussing the allegations, the child used an odd word, but I didn't think much of it. A few days later, I was watching a video of the child interacting with their grandmother, who hates my client. From about a week before that interview, the grandmother used the exact same odd word in the exact context the child later used it. At that moment, it became clear that child had been coached. It was the first real ah-ha-ha moment of my career. My blood boils when people coach children and use them in this way. You are a disgusting pause to use a child like this. No one ever knows if a child is lying or telling the truth moving forward, which makes them so vulnerable. And the kid themselves just is destroyed by the lie. Sometimes they start to believe the lie.
My mom made me write a bunch of made-up stuff about my dad when I was 8 years old. Yeah, it was fucked up. Almost forgot about that one. Holy cow, folks, so many comments.
My client has been keeping her son away from the father because the father has a new child. She is concerned that her son will act violently towards the new child and she could be held liable. Judge, she could be held liable. Judge, that's not even a defense.
Man, this sounds like a really sad family situation for the older half-brother. Sounds like his mom is pissed that his dad has moved on, so she refuses to co-parent and wants her kid to hate his dad and the new baby.
But what fucking attorney was like, "Yoke, let's go to court with this"?
I had a client who was accused of taking a young woman's car and then crashing it, fleeing the scene. The girl testified at trial that she had given him the keys that night because she was drunk and would never, ever drink and drive. Apparently, she was not aware that I had requested and obtained a copy of her driving record, which showed she received a Dewey a month after the incident. I still remember the look on her face when I handed her driving record to her and said, "Except for that one time you got caught a month later." Right. The look on the judge's face was equally memorable.
So I'm guessing her testimony was just not considered credible. What happened with your client?
I can't remember what exactly the judge called her testimony. Something along the line of absolutely not believable. There were quite a few other evidentiary issues that pointed to the possibility that someone else, perhaps an inebriated young woman, was driving the vehicle at the time of the accident. Client was acquitted.
I knew the cops beat up my client and framed him. They described a knife in his possession that caused them to fear for their safety. Oddly, they never seized it. We won the criminal case and filed a civil rights case. While deposing one, he described the knife in detail. No more than 3 minutes later, he slipped up and claimed his partner told him my guy had a knife, but he never saw it himself. I told him, "That's not what you just said," and saw him panic. His lawyer panicked, too, and asked to see me outside. When we got in the hallway, I withdrew my settlement demand, and the case settled for a substantially larger amount within 45 minutes.
Why are cops like this?
Moments like this usually happen at bond hearings for me. It almost never fails. If the judge starts by saying something good for our side, he's going to deny bond 9 times out of 10. But if the judge starts by saying things like how these are some serious allegations, and although he's not prejudging the case, there seem to have been some bad decisions made, etc., that's usually just the judge trying to put the fear of God in the defendant before granting bond so he'll behave. While out on bond,
That's like the ringing phone rule for movies. People are at a gathering. The phone rings. Someone answers it. Nobody knows what was said, but we can all tell by the expression on their face whether it was good news or bad news. So which is it? If it was a happy gathering, then the phone call will be bad news. If it was a sad gathering, then the phone call will be good news. They have to contrast the setup with the follow-through to make it more impactful.
This was actually fairly recent. I was in a deposition of a fact witness to an automobile accident in which my client was killed. The defendant's attorney had called the deposition and over the course of an hour and a half or so elicited a lot of testimony which seemed to place my client partially at fault, which would impact my client's edit, financial, recovery. After sitting quietly for an hour and a half, I asked less than a dozen questions, the last of which was about the specific location of my client when he had first seen them. Based on his answer, it was clear that my client couldn't possibly be at fault. I sent a follow-up letter that same day, and the case had settled within the next 2 weeks.
Wait, your client was killed, but it would impact his recovery. Am I missing something?
Not the person you replied to, but I would assume financial recovery for the family of the deceased.
I worked on a case involving defective processors. In discovery, we got emails from the defendant's engineers that had worked on the processors. They were in an Asian country, but the emails were in English because they were going to us executives. One of the more senior engineers basically laid out the exact defect we were suing over, explaining what the problem was and why it was their fault. And finishing with this is big problem. We ship-crapped a customer. Needless to say, we hit them over the head with that in mediation, and they settled shortly after.
Engineer being ignored the skies, bluey suck at hike.
Obligatory, not mine, but my mom's story. She was fighting for custody on behalf of the father, trying to prove that the kids were living in subpar conditions with their drug addict mother in spite of the ample child support provided. It was a tough case because courts are so hesitant to pull kids away from their moms. Then the mom burst out that she had been feeding the kids cat food as proof that she wouldn't let them starve. Needless to say, the judge didn't take that as a good reason for the kids to stay with their mom.
Wait, did you say cat food?
I'm kind of baffled by that. We have a cat. The damn cat food is the most expensive food in the house.
Not a lawyer, but I'm currently in a custody battle. Mother is saying I can't be trusted because I've been refusing to take our child to the therapist. The therapist testified I couldn't bring our child in because therapy must have both parents' consent, and mother has retracted consent, and mother has retracted consent.
Your Honor, he won't bring our child to a therapist because he can't. And why is that? Because, Your Honor, I won't let him.
When her curls were still intact.
She's a happy person, and happy people don't murder people.
Not lawyer, but represented myself in court. Got a parking ticket and contested it due to misleading signs. Took a bunch of pictures and brought it to court. Judge agreed and dismissed the case. Hold up. What about the towing fees? I asked, as he was about to read the next case. Got those back too.
Not a lawyer, but we had no evidence that the woman who slammed into my stopped car going 85 mph was drunk. Until she indignantly admitted it on tape in her deposition, she busted into my deposition and demanded she go first because I was a lying bitch. She excitedly told my lawyer that the police report was wrong because it said she was coming from the movie theater when she was actually coming from her friend's bar. Did you have anything to drink at your friend's bar? Course. How many drinks he done? They just keep my glass full. Did you take any medicine that day? Methadone and low blood pressure medicine. I see. The cops had refused to breathalyzer her at the scene because her husband was a firefighter that they knew personally. They told her to go home, sober up, and go to the hospital later. I heard the whole thing but had no proof until she handed it to me. They settled same day.
Yeah, it's amazing what people will say when they're excited. I got rear-ended once, and the first thing she said to the cop was that she had just gotten her brakes fixed, but her car barely slowed down when she pushed the brake pedal all the way in. I made sure to pass that on to everyone involved. Before she said that, I was pretty worried. She came out of her car, rubbing her neck, and her official address that she gave the cop was a PO box.
Isn't rear-ending someone one of those assumed-at-fault cases anyway?
I clerk for a judge, and we had a low-level thief in our courtroom who had robbed one of his neighbor's houses in the winter in Colorado, and all the police had to do was follow the footsteps back to his house, where he was hanging out with the stolen items and a small amount of drugs, and a small amount of drugs in a shitty handgun. Idiot. Edited for clarity.
We had a local guy call the cops and claim his truck was stolen. Found shortly after crashed through a fence into a pole. Footprints in the snow led right to his front door. Somehow he knew the right people and got away with it.
When I found a video on Facebook of the plaintiff squatting 300 pounds the month before his deposition, that was a good one. Oh, he was saying he couldn't work and had back injuries after a minor car accident. Just as a follow-up, I sent the video to his attorney afterward. The deposition and the case immediately went away. He also adamantly denied being able to work out or doing any lifting during his deposition. It was a big lie. Also, I agree that this really sucks for the people with legitimate injuries who people quickly want to just label litigious.
Not a lawyer, but was working as a paralegal for a law firm. We were defending a claim which had run into tens of thousands of pounds against our client, a holiday home, by a woman who had tripped over a speed bump while walking back to her caravan and damaged her knee. The fall was genuine. The question was whose fault this was. She claimed it was the holiday home's fault because she hadn't seen the speed bump due to low lighting, poor marking, etc. The claim had, outrageously. Her response, well, I remember thinking how it wasn't well marked when I was walking up to it. Needless to say, it was a short day in court after that point.
When I compared the scanned copy of the deed provided by the other side's lawyers to the original my client eventually got around to providing, the scanned copy provided by the other side had a witness signature. The original did not.
Another trick I've seen in Reddit is the last page of the contract will have like one paragraph, then a bunch of blank space, then the signature lines. After you sign, they throw it in the printer and add a few more paragraphs.
That's why you see this sentence. The rest of this page was intentionally left blank.
Parent termination case I was prosecuting. Dad went on how he has changed his life around and worked the program. Asked him what step he was on, and he proudly proclaimed 3. Asked him what step 3 is, he had no idea. Then asked him step 2 was. Again, no idea. Parental rights terminated.
got really concerned for a second there that you were terminating parents and not their parental rights. Edit, my most upvoted comment is about thinking a lawyer was killing parents. Can't say I'm surprised, log.
At a restraining order trial, it was essentially my client's word versus his regarding a sexual assault. He did a good job dressing up and acting very appropriate during most of his testimony. But then he was asked a series of open-ended questions, and he said something to the effect that she kept coming up on me with that fucking pussy. Allegedly, during a lecture, and as soon as he said it, a look came on his face and the judge's face, and everyone knew the ruse of respectable young gentlemen had failed. I won.
My client was accused of brutally murdering a dog. Cop testified that there was no testing of the blood, nobody ever found, and admitted it could have, in fact, run away. The eyewitness said she could see the killing down the hallway from the dining room. Cop testified there was no hallway, and the dining room was on a different level of the house than the killing supposedly took place. Then the person who was leading the lynch mob against my client around town for the last year testified that she had been in the apartment between the two visits by the cop to evaluate the scene. No body, a compromised crime scene, witness who couldn't see anything, an admission that there was no proof the dog was dead. Closing argument lasted 3 seconds. Your Honor, I'm asking for an acquittal. Edit, my first award, thank. For those who asked, this was in Canada and received a fair bit of media attention prior to trial.
Who fabricates bullshit like this? What do people gain from it?
People get it in their head that someone has done something, and if they could only get someone else to see what they see, what is so obvious, then not only would the perp get what is coming to them, but then they would be lauded as heroes for being the only ones smart enough to see the crime. Bonus points if it involves cruelty to animals or children. Easy to get others on your side then.